to, okay, now my screen is gone. Cool. I'm going to stay sitting down so that the online people can also hear me. Because I've noticed being online, sometimes when you're standing next to the slides and the online people are like, what are you saying? So hello, online people. Yes, so I'm going to talk about pigs, people, and pets. Some of this is a bit preliminary, and I truly welcome all input and discussion on some of the later stuff that I'll talk about. So just to get right into it, nope. There we go. Why pigs? This is the question I've gotten when I started talking about this. Why? Who cares? Well, I care, obviously. But pigs came here with the first settlers, so they've been here since settlement when people brought everything they needed, right? They bring cows, sheep, goats, horses, dogs, cats, some unintentional friends like mice, but we're not going to get into that. So pigs have been here, but they nearly disappear from the archaeological record around 1200, maybe a little bit before, but they never fully disappear, and they don't disappear from like the documentary record either. So I said in the abstract that pigs tend to get less attention, and I think that they were maybe even more economically valuable than sheep and horses at the beginning of settlement. We'll get to that in just a minute. But they've been here. There we go. In the 16th century, we have some what's the word? Like a documentary account that there are pigs here. The pigs are very few, but they're very fat. But we don't have a lot of pigs because there's no forest for them. The pigs that are here, these fat pigs, are roaming in the summer, but they have to be brought inside in the winter, and they're given household waste and hay mixed with water and some other kind of leftover bits. We also have church records that say that there are various churches that have pigs in the 1300s, and not just pigs, but sows and piglets. So they are reproducing, so there must also be male pigs. So again, they're not super common, but there's still evidence that they are here. And it's been said that some of the later pig bones that we find in the archaeological record are probably more representative of imported meat cuts rather than large-scale pig farming. There are probably a few isolated areas where people are still raising pigs, but it's not common at all. It's even been said in a book called Saga Svínaræktar, yep, that we are a bacon-less land for 300 years. I know some people that would be devastated by that news. But around 1600 to 1900, there are very few pigs. They're in the documentary record. It's probably mostly pigs being brought in from elsewhere. After 1900, people start farming them again, but it's a different kind of pig. It's not these cute little spotted guys anymore. Yes. So when people have pigs, and especially in the settlement, when people first come over here, what are they doing with them? Why do I say that pigs are more economically important? In the beginning years, they're a very good source of meat. While you're raising your herds, you're getting your cows and your sheep and your goats, you don't want to kill them because then you lose out on the wool and the milk. But you still need to eat, and pigs reproduce so much faster and so many more babies at one time. So you might get 2 lambs, maybe 3 if you're lucky, or 1 calf. But with pigs, you're going to get 9 to 16 at a time. 16 is probably on the high end. We're probably closer to 9 to 12 most of the time. Their reproduction is faster. And you're not really using them for anything else. You don't need them for the wool, so it's okay to slaughter more of the younger pigs. Whereas if you start doing that with your lambs and your cows, you're not going to get a herd big enough to survive later on. They would also be really good at waste management. So I've told my students before that pigs will destroy everything you love because they are omnivores. They will eat anything. So it's really good for waste management, but it's also got a bit of a downside because if they get loose and they get into your fodder, you can't survive over the winter. You can't feed the rest of your animals. So you really have to watch them. They would also be really useful for land clearance. So this is the big one that I think made them most important in the settlement. People get here and they need to create land for farming. So you get your pigs, and the sheep and the goats, of course, help with this as well. But they're all kind of eating different things and they graze in different ways. So your land gets cleared, you can start farming, you don't really need the pigs anymore. You've got your herds built up of your cows and your sheep and your goats, and you don't need that extra source of meat. Maybe you don't need the waste management as much anymore, and you don't need to clear any land. It's already been cleared, and maybe you want to stop clearing the land before all of the good soil goes away. So very useful, but potentially not for a long period of time, which could be why they start to disappear after around 1200. So I have been working on a project called Svínasaga, and we just got more funding from Fornleifafræði. Thank you. So this is all about how people were keeping pigs in the Viking Age and beyond. So this new round of funding is the beyond part. There will still be some Viking Age, but getting into later evidence of pigs. So this first round of funding that is now over, and I'm going to tell you the results of that. I was sending pig bones for isotopic analysis to see what they were eating. So how people are keeping pigs, what are they feeding them, or what are the pigs finding for themselves? So we're looking at carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur as evidence of their diet. And this work has been done before, focused in Mývatnsveit primarily. And I tried to do a whole island-wide sample. You'll see that on the first round, it was not island-wide. I'll explain. But the work that had been done in Mývatnsveit showed variation in pig diet, which I think is not surprising based on the fact that they're omnivores, based on the fact that people just do different things. But at these, there's my little guy, these three sites here, Sveakat, Hafsstaðir, and Skútustaðir, they're doing mixed terrestrial and freshwater diet. They're eating more animal protein. They were probably penned, so kept in a pen, and fed household waste. This is a lot more reflective of what people would also have been eating. Whereas at Hrísheimer, they are probably just free-range vegetarians. They don't have a lot of animal protein in the diet. Most of the plant-based stuff is terrestrial, so they're just out foraging, eating whatever they can find. So we wanted to continue this work in other areas and see what people are doing in other places. So I sent 72 samples from 14 sites. This was just what I could identify in the first round and what was relatively easily accessible. Sites vary in type, location, and time period. I meant to focus only on the Viking Age, but I had an opportunity to get some other bones, so I just said, oh, I'll just take those. And as I said, more samples coming soon. Joe, I don't know if you're on here, but get ready for lots of requests from me. I know you're excited. So here's just a quick little table about the sites that I have looked at and where they're located. You'll see they are just 3 areas. I'm going to show you a map in a minute, so you don't have to worry too much about this. But they vary between domestic site, abandoned domestic sites. We have an assembly site in there and some seasonal or specialized use sites. So here's the map and the site names. Again, this is from the first round of samples. And like I said, you can see that while I wanted to do an island-wide kind of what are we doing with pigs, we got these 3 areas. That is partially because a lot of the reports were hard to find. The bones are mostly in the museum, and there are a lot of boxes. I went through, I think, 30-something boxes just for Alþingisstrætir, and I didn't think that there was enough time to go through that many boxes for all of the other sites. Some of them were slightly later than Viking Age. Some of the data just wasn't available at the time, and it wasn't a huge grant that I had for the first round. So now, much bigger grant. I think I've got 15 sites listed that I want to go back to, or that I want to include. And some of these sites I'm going back to. Yes. Alþingisstræti failed. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough collagen in the bones, so we don't actually have any results from here. I think there's a few pigs that I didn't sample, but the preservation was just not good. So unfortunately, we don't have any data from there. But a quick little overview of the results about the pig diet. Start with Skagafjörður. This is where I did my dissertation, so I know a lot about all the sites here. And I'm doing science, right? So I had my hypothesis. What's in the midden is what the pigs will be eating. Makes sense, right? It's right next to the house. It's whatever people are throwing away. It's pretty easy to access. So I assumed most of the sites in Skagafjörður are focused on marine fish. So the pigs are going to be eating marine fish. No, they were not. These assemblages are 60 to 80% marine fish, and the pigs are free-range vegetarians. I was very wrong. It's good to be wrong, but why aren't they eating these fish? Why aren't they right next to the house? I don't have an answer, but it was just very, not humbling, but the most obvious answer isn't always the answer, I suppose. So that was an interesting conclusion there. And if we move over to Strandir, hi Elisabeth. Again, generally free-range vegetarians. Most of these middens were also very marine. We have one pig from Sandvik who seems to have had a freshwater fish heavy diet, which is a bit strange because there are no freshwater fish in the assemblage. However, here's a picture of Sandvik. I don't think that these pigs were raised here, so we don't really have the full representation of skeletal elements, so there's not really whole pigs there. It's just a few sort of select parts. So I think they were actually raised somewhere else and brought in either whole and we're just missing the bones, but more likely brought in as specific cuts of meat. So that could explain why they're not super marine, because you can see the location of these sites very close to the ocean. At least on Hegrenäs, we have a couple kilometers for some of the sites before you're like at the sea, but here you're right there. So why are they not eating seaweed or something at least? I think they were not raised here. And what turned out to be the most interesting that I was not expecting, there we go, is alþingisreitur. So as I said, I went through, I think 30 boxes, every single box I had to look through to find these bones. And since I was going through all of these boxes, and since the site was occupied from settlement until modern times, I thought, take all of them. Take every pig you can find and see if we see any change through time. Surprise, surprise, we do. So in the early period, free-range vegetarians. They're walking around on the landscape, they're eating whatever plants they can find. The next period, 1226 to 1500, we have a mix. So there's still some free-range vegetarian pigs, but some seem to be penned and fed household waste, or at least stay close to the household and eat basically what people would have been eating. So it's a much more mixed diet. There's more animal protein and a little mix between like marine and terrestrial. Then we go back to free-range vegetarians. They're off doing whatever, finding their own food. And then we have one weird guy. This was only one sample, but it had a very, very high nitrogen level, which is the higher you go on nitrogen, the higher trophic level you're eating. So if you're eating plants, it's going to be really low. If you're eating herbivores, maybe in the middle. If you're eating like carnivores, it's going to be up at the top. This protein level was very, very high. And I did make a joke that maybe he was eating other pigs, but it's also just very possible that the pig was eating household waste. And at this time, maybe they just had a very meat heavy diet in the household. I believe we're going to run this sample again for oxygen or strontium, just to see if we can find a little bit more about what this pig was doing, where they were from. But it was just a very interesting change, and it's not marine protein. So that's the other thing. It's not like they're eating a bunch of seals or something, because seals would be high on this trophic level, but it's not marine protein. So we don't really know what's going on with that guy, but hopefully the new samples and running the sample again will tell us something. So that is the diet stuff. That's kind of the results of the first round of this funding. And the second round of funding is going to include more of the place name stuff that I was talking about in the abstract. And this is the part that's all sort of very preliminary, and I welcome all comments on this because this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I'm a bone guy. I haven't really done a lot of this place name stuff, but some really interesting things I think are coming out of this. So I'm interested to hear your opinions. We made a map. I say we because Gunnar makes maps for me. I'm not very good at it. But we made a map of all of the pig words. And I will say this map is missing Ráði, but that is on the next map. This is just an older version. But these are just words for pig. If you know words for pig that I'm missing, besides Ráði, that's in the next one, please let me know. And also if you know words that are very specifically for like places where you keep pigs. So I have the example in English, we might say sty, like a pig sty, but I've heard that sti is not necessarily just for pigs here. But if there are any words like that that you know, please let me know, because those would also be interesting to look at. But here's a map of pig words, and then two special pigs who actually had names that we find in some of the documentary sources. Solveig is talked about in Landnámabók. He was left in Galtarhamar with a sow, and 3 years later they came back and there were 70 pigs, and they said, whoa, this guy's great. Let's call this Valley Solvadalur after him. And then there was Begaður, who was a boar that jumped into Svinavat, swam so hard his hooves fell off and he died, and they decided to name a hill after him. So these are just two like specifically named pigs that I could find. There may be more. I'm not sure. If you know, let me know. But this is kind of how they're mapped out on the landscape. And nope, that was the wrong way. No. There we go. If we put the pig names, and this also includes Raude this time, there are very few of them, so you won't really notice a difference. But if we include pig names and archaeological sites with pig bones, this is likely not all of them. This is 45 that I could find. I presented this in Norway a couple months ago, so it was sort of a fast, like, find all the archaeological sites you can. I think there's more, but at least 45. So you can see if pig names correlate with archaeological sites with pigs in any way. And in some ways, sure. We've got pig name out here and pig bones. But interestingly, I think on Hagerness, where I did my dissertation, lots of pigs, no pig names. And in Strandir, pigs, lots of pigs, no pig names. But again, I don't think the pigs were raised there. So are there connections? I don't know if any of this is statistically significant. I haven't really looked into that part too much, but just seeing that there are some patterns where maybe just because you have pigs doesn't mean that they're important enough to give names on the landscapes to. Maybe they are. But there's one pig word and possible connection that I think is quite interesting and would love to hear your thoughts on. Purk and Danish trading posts. So this is from 1602 to 1786. Location of the trading posts is the little triangles, these guys. And Purk names are these little circles. You'll notice that they are concentrated on the coast, and some of them are quite close to some of the Danish trading posts. Okay, we're going to get into my little like bulletin board of string in a minute. Ignore these. These seem to be related to a troll woman named Purka and not actually associated with pig. So what are the connections? Are there connections? Is Cece crazy? Maybe. P words, words starting with P, are loan words from other languages. We don't know exactly when some of them come in, but they come in different times. Is Purka from the Danish? I'm not going to pretend to pronounce this because I don't speak Danish. Possibly around 1700, some of the stuff that I was looking into said maybe around this time. That would kind of fit with Danish trading posts. Okay, it could be earlier, could be later, could not be related to Danish at all, could also be related to Norwegian. Could it be that the Danish officers who were at these trading posts did bring piglets to raise for slaughter? This is written down. So trading posts became known as pig places. So you just give them some pig names and you take the Danish, oh, we'll call it Purka, Purke, whatever. And maybe that reinforced some new names, because I don't think Purk is introduced earlier than 1300. But if anyone has any other information, let me know. But I don't think it's introduced any earlier than that, the word Purka. So these might be newer names. So are these just known as pig places? Danish officers bring piglets. Sometimes they might give them to someone as like a gift or as a trade for something. So you just think like, oh, that's the pig places. Let's call this Purke. Or what I find the most fun, and this is this guy, katkvæli, a cat whale. There's some superstitions at sea. You can't say certain words. Here's some of them. There are many more you're not supposed to say, because if you say kat keli, he might hear you and he's going to come sink your boat. So we can't do that. You can't say svin. There are svinhvalir. So some of these beaked whales fall under the svinhvalir group. And if you say their name, they'll hear you and they will come and they will destroy your boat. And that's not good. You're not even supposed to like meow or boila, whatever that is, or else they'll hear you and they will come destroy your boat. So svin was probably replaced with purka because of this. The superstition. This is from Íslenskir sjávarhættir, and there's in Íslenskar þjóðsögur a list of things you're not supposed to say, or bad things happen. So if a place was originally called Sviná, no, you can't say that while you're on your boat. They'll hear you. Let's call it Purká. Let's call it Purke, not Svinay. So is it just convenient that some of the Danish trading posts are also located near these places where the names were changed because the fishermen didn't want to say Svin something? Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe this is where all my red strings come in. That it could be some combination of superstition, Danish influence, that some of these places seem to have been renamed, and they're all coastal. And if we go back to the map, you can see that most of the association is here on the west coast. There's nothing down here, and a few up in the West Fjords. So there's really just not that many Purk names anyway. But these are just some ideas. This is one of the sort of patterns that stuck out the most based on the names. Nothing else really seemed to have any distribution like this. It all is seems kind of random. So that's just something to think about. And finally, just a few sort of questions and final closing thoughts. A lot of the names from the settlement have stuck to this day, so especially names like Solvadalish that are written down in Mannamabók. They don't really seem to change that often, and we're still getting new names. So at least these Purka names, because that is an introduced word, probably introduced, like I said, probably no earlier than 1300. So even though pigs aren't super common, they're still making their mark on the landscape with these names. And we do have names changing from Svin something to something else. So one of the biggest, or like one of the examples I know that's close to home here is Vífilsstaðafræðing. Is used to be Svinafræðing. And why did it change? When did it change? Did people just forget about the pigs and then this guy owned the land and they named it after him? I don't actually know the answer to that. If you know, let me know. But pig numbers go down. They still stay present on the landscape, present in social memory. Yes. The new grant stuff is going to look more into this. We're going to do more on pig diet and creating sort of a background profile, because the sulfur is turning out kind of weird on some of these. But as I'm sure you know, we are kind of weird with sulfur here. So we have to figure out what the baseline sulfur is to see if the pigs are actually weird or if it's just Iceland. So that is coming soon. Thank you. Please, happy to talk about this obviously now, but please feel free to email me if you have suggestions, questions, things I haven't thought about, things I haven't, words I don't know, anything. Yes. Thanks.